Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session 2 of season 7. Last time we were looking at the overall kind of the road ahead as we have reached what we decided last time was the halfway point of the first age. And now we begin focusing on the discussion of season 7 in earnest here this evening. Welcome. I am joined, as always, by Nick Palazzo and Marie Prosser, and Dave Kale should be joining us soon. We have some reasons to believe that he'll be able to join us as soon as he gets free from kid duties. This is one of the things, of course, that happens in a project like the Silmarillion Film Project, right? When we started the Silmarillion Film Project, my younger son was about 5, and he's now 15 and a sophomore in high school. And by the time we get to the end of the first stage, Wally will be, nearing his high school graduation, and all that. So we just kind of like family life comes past and through and around us here, as we all are growing older. Anyway, so Dave will be around when he can. So before we start, lots of fun coming up here in October and beyond. We have a bunch of moots coming up, middle moot, not this weekend, but next weekend in Waterloo, Iowa. On the 14th of October. The next weekend on the 21st of October is going to be New England Moot here in Derry, New Hampshire. A bunch of others coming up. Denver in November. New Orleans, which is a brand new spot for us, in December. Osmoot down in Sydney, Australia at the end of January. Love the logo for that, above all shadows. Osmoot 2024. And then Sunshine Moot in February. And we have a bunch more coming up in the spring. Actually, we've got like a whole bunch of moots jockeying for a position in March and April and May. So there'll be more opportunities to come here. One other thing I would mention in October here, at the end of October, on October 28th, is going to be our fall space showcase. So we're going to have a day where we're going to have a whole bunch of what we call space capsules. Our space program, of course, is our adult continuing education class. It's like the most reputable form of recreation that I know, where you can learn about awesome, fun things that you love to study about and talk about and learn about. Whether you're learning things that you've always wanted to learn, like a language or something that you've never had the chance to, or whether you're immersing yourself in discussion on things that you love, like anime or Old English literature or fantasy literature and films, whatever it may be. You can see, so the space showcase on the 28th will be an opportunity to sort of see, like, get little mini features, get a taste for the different space modules that are coming up, including, rumor has it, there's going to be a space capsule by the great Amy Sturgis, who is coming and beginning teaching in our space program in the beginning of the new year. So lots of fun stuff coming up there. So that'll be on February 28th. You can get more information there from our website and social media announcements as we get closer to that. But let us return to season 7. So we want to start with theme, right? We want to think about, do we want to think first about theme or shape? Like, we can think about the overall kind of structure of season 7 and what we're going to cover. Do you guys have inspirations for what the... So I really love... Marie put together this sort of review for us of what we were focusing on in the first 6 seasons, which I think is great. So we had... the season 1 and season 2 were essentially like, what is the purpose of the Valar? Like, are they here to rule and dominate, or are they... or are they like, and so that question of like, what do they do? Melkor and Manwë's very different visions, right, about what the Valar were for and how they were supposed to be interacting with the world. Season 2, when the elves awoke, and so the whole focus of that season was, where is the home of the elves? is Middle Earth where the destiny of the elves lie, or is it in the West that the destiny of the elves lay? Season 3 was focused on rebellion. That was, of course, the Feanor season, which begins with the kinslaying and took us through to the death of Feanor and the rising of the sun at the end. Reconciliation, as we were settling in, right, and we had the tension between the different elements of the Noldor, right? The Feanorians and the non-Feanorians, among the Noldor and the Sindar and Thingol, right? And all that stuff. And that included, right? It was in season 4 that we got the Thingol finds out about the kinslaying and, right? So all of those tensions. And of course, the culmination of that season was the wedding of Galadriel and Celeborn. So that was kind of the culmination, reconciliation. That was a really fun sort of focus in that season. Season 5 is about change. How with the rising of the sun, the stuff changes and change begins to accelerate in Middle Earth. And of course, that was also the season when we introduced humans. So the idea of mortality and change and how the elves were having to cope with that was the sort of the overarching focus. And then, of course, last season, season 7, release from bondage, Lathian, the release from bondage, and what that means. That the kind of liberation and how it's an obvious motif throughout the Beren and Luthien story, but what is it pointing to, right? What is it sort of, what do all those jailbreaks in the story pointing to ultimately, right? Culminating in the transactions in and with Mandos, right? At the end. So that's, these themes have not necessarily been, thus far they've been fairly organic. And of course, many of them based on, most of them based on, various sort of interests of the texts and the stories that we're covering here. So, obviously the goal is not to just kind of pick something that we want to focus on and, build the stories around it, but to sort of see what direction the stories seem to be pointing. Because if we can identify some kind of central theme or motif, it helps to guide our own decision making, so that we can so that the story, as we're retelling it within the context of Silmarillion, can be have that clearer consistency as we move through. So, do you want to think theme, or should we think structure first? Do you want to review what happens first before we do that?
Reviewing what happens is probably not a terrible idea.
Okay. Sure, because I think that one difference between this season and the one we just finished is that there was one very clear story through the last season. There weren't, there were subplots, but they weren't really very well developed. So the theme was just exploring our main storyline. For this season, whatever we choose as a theme is going to determine what some of the side stories are going to be about and be like. So if we have a broad overview of what stories we know need to be there, then choose a theme and then get into details of how that would look in other storylines. I think that might be a successful way of doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be a little more synthetic, like reconciliation, rebellion, and change.
Right. We need to interweave some things that have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
what needs to happen?
What needs to happen? Do we have a slide for? Okay, yeah, we do. The next slide, storylines. Okay, so we've already decided. In last week, we were saying that the clear. Another thing that we've often done is have a sort of a central character who isn't necessarily, the focus of the story all the way through, but is a sort of a dominant figure who to whom we keep returning, and the shape of whose story really forms the sort of the spine of the whole story of the season. And it seemed perfectly obvious that Hurin is the obvious candidate for that role in this season. As we know, the things that we definitely know, we want to begin with Hurin and Huor being taken to Gondolin, to sort of begin the framing of the story that's going to end in the Near Ninth or Nordiad, and then of course we're going to end at the Fens of Serach. Well, I say of course, one of the decisions we were discussing last time was, were we going to end at the Fens of Serach with Hurin being captured and dragged off, or were we going to end with like Hurin before Morgoth and Morgoth cursing Hurin? And we decided not to do the latter because we decided that that's really the beginning of the Turin story rather than the end of the Hurin story. That really Day Shall Come Again is sort of the ending of the Hurin and Huor story. So we're definitely going to end at the Fens of Serech at the end of the final episode. So again, we're starting with Hurin and Huor and Gondolin, and we're ending with Hurin and Huor at the Fens of Serech. So they are the obvious sort of frame of that. Let's pause for a second. Between those endpoints, what are we doing? So they're going to return from Gondolin. Galdor is going to die relatively early on, right? And so we're going to get a really comparatively young Hurin taking over as king in Dor Loman, and his role. It's one of the things I always found. I remember at a very early age being struck by the way in which, like, Fingon seems to defer to Hurin. In the Nirnaeth, right? When they're, like there's just that one line, I think, where it says, like, but Hurin counseled against it, right? And Fingon goes along with him, right? So it's clear, like, the kind of respect that he gains from the Elven lords as well as his own people. Clearly there needs to be some sort of story there, right? Kind of some middle to the story of Hurin and Huor, which begins in Gondolin and ends in the Fens of Serech. And that seems to be about Hurin's coming to his position and what his vision for the people is? Something like that, right?
Because, again, this depends what we do with the theme here, but he's asking to leave Gondolin because he wants to have a chance to be part of the fight.
Yeah.
And then he goes home and almost immediately becomes Lord of Dor Loman.
Yeah.
So we have to assume that his position is then used to say, hey, Fingon, when are we going to fight Morgoth?
Right.
Like,
right.
There has to be some urgency on his
time.
part.
Yeah.
He wants to do this now, not later.
Mm-hmm.
And
it, of course, ends extremely well for him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But we've also seen Hador, whose story ended as an old man who couldn't fight anymore.
Yes.
And Hurin doesn't want that for himself.
Right.
So he's choosing I want the life where we go all in to fight Morgoth. Right. Now, obviously, we can get a lot more nuance to that story, but that sense of urgency is probably going to follow through the season with him helping to orchestrate the Union of Maedhros. Like, obviously, Fingon's on board. So is Hurin simply supporting Fingon? Probably not. Like, this is probably, at least in some ways, Hurin's movement as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And of course, another thing that needs to get factored in there is Morwen as well,
yes.
Right? I mean, I think about Morwen and her reputation in later, right? In the only part of her story that was actually told, right? That is, the early part of the Turin story after Hurin's death. And the sort of, atmosphere of, like the whole, like, ethos of Morwen, right? And the reputation that she gains and stuff. The opportunity to show, like, what was that like during Hurin's reign? Like, what was Morwen like during her? What was their partnership like? Morwen is one of the, like, strongest, really minor characters in Tolkien's work. If you see what I mean, like, she actually does and says very little in the stories that we have of her, or at least it feels very disproportionate to. She feels like a very much larger than life, kind of big character, and yet we never really get her doing much or saying much. And so establishing Morwen and Hurin and Morwen's relationship seems really important there in the middle.
Yeah, and not even the middle, like early, because
early too, yeah.
They're going to get married probably even before he becomes Lord of Dor Loman. So
Yeah.
like right away he comes back, marries her, and takes over for his dad. I
Yeah.
mean, we can discuss the order, but it's going to be right up front. So she'll
Yeah.
be his partner through the whole
Mm-hmm.
season.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be really interesting if, like he comes back from Gondolin and she kind of dismisses him as a fop a little bit.
Right. Right.
And
He's dressed all
but
fancy.
right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
he's like so driven, like because this man is singularly driven, like that
Yeah.
he leaves the most wonderful place he could possibly be,
Yeah.
to go and go and live back in the dirt with the rest of us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, honestly, Hurin's character is not fleshed out very much more than Morwen's character in the written, in the published texts of Tolkien. So,
But there is a lot of subtext that, like,
There
there's
is.
a lot
There
that you
is,
can be
yeah.
like, okay, but he is this way though. Like,
Yes.
there's a lot you can glean, and Morwen as well. There's so much you can pull out
Mhm.
of the very, very little that we're given, and which
And
yeah,
the two of them are more fleshed out than Huor or Rian.
For sure.
So
Absolutely.
we're going to have a lot of conversations about what direction we want these characters to go in and who they are as people, because
Yeah.
it is true that there's so little in the text. You can easily read the story and develop a certain idea of who they are.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
radically different from someone else's.
No, you're
know.
right. I mean, there are relatively few fixed points. Like, there are some fixed points,
Right.
But,
And so, like,
yeah.
Hurin being relentless, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
100% give you that one.
Exactly.
And, Morwen being proud and strong, for sure.
Yeah.
But what does that look like? And what do they see in each other? And how does their story progress forward and everything? That's going to take some developing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And of course, like, how to do that, like, what happens right in the middle in order to bring, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they do have 3 kids, so we can kind of time the story out based on that.
Yep. Yep.
But the tragedy of the death of Lilith is probably going to be part of a bigger story.
Yep.
Because the plague that she dies in likely affects all of the people of Dorloman.
Yes.
And is a precursor to the Nirnaeth. So that's going to likely be a fairly pivotal plot point, as well as an important character moment for their family.
How much are we going to want to get into? Because, okay, so there is a lot of complex interweaving of Dorloman and Brethil. And, their lines and the families and the double first cousins because of the double wedding and everything else. Like, how much are we going to want to bring Brethil and, like, Brethil politics, which I don't mean that shallowly, right? But, like, how much is the story of Brethil going to be a part of this as well? Are we going to need to spend time in Brethil? Like, our narrative spend time in Brethil?
I think so, although not necessarily a lot of time. Anyone who takes part in the Nirnaeth, anyone who joins the battle, we need their story. How'd they get there? Yeah. So Brethil is going to send fighters.
Right.
The Lord of Brethil's going to die in the Nirnaeth. Yeah. And Glorithel, his wife, is the sister of Galdor.
Yeah.
I looked at this family tree, I promise. But
oh man, I get so confused with this. Like, it's one of my goals by the end of season 7 to, like, finally have all this stuff straight. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about these characters a lot. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But and so she's going to die as in the same year as the Nirnaeth as well, when her husband dies. But their son is Handir,
which is Brandir's father, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Haldir. Anyway, whatever his name is, it's Brandir's father.
You know that
sure Brandir's father.
You know that their line is starting to slide down off the hill when they start abandoning the Hal designation.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, no. He is between the ages of Hurin and Huor.
Right.
So he's and the brothers are only 3 years apart. So he's right at their age.
They were Isn't he the one who originally, like before Huor got invented, was the one who was taken to Gondolin with, or ends up in Gondolin, like in the first draft?
I don't recall.
I think it
possibly.
was. Yeah,
because he exists as in the same place in the same time. He's their age. He's with them because they're being raised in Brethil, right? So as much as Hurin and Huor are clearly this duo, he's the third guy.
Yeah.
So whatever the story of how Brethil gets involved in the Nernight is, I think it's gonna at least include some kind of relationship between is it Hundir or Heldir? Anyway, him and Hurin and Huor. So then that'll set up, of course, Turin's later relationship with Brandir, which is, less friendly.
So
less friendly.
One thing that's occurring to me is the juxtaposition between kind of the theme that's presented through Hurin and Huor and the theme that's presented through Maedhros. Because the theme of the Hurin and Huor story in as much as it relates to the Nernight is, I have faith that this is going to work out.
Yep.
Even if I ultimately don't get to reap the benefits of that. And I, in fact, am not the final instrument of that. Whereas Maedhros is all about I have to get this done. I'm the guy. Nobody else is going to do this. If I do not do this, no one will. Right?
There's a reason it's called the Union of Maedhros and not the Union of Fingon or the Union of Hurin.
Well, that feels a little bit clever branding on the part of Fingon, given how Fingon's press team, given how things go. But
the point is, it's definitely Maedhros's plan and idea. The reason he needs Fingon is there's absolutely no way that Maedhros can pull this off after the Feanorians have done what they've done in recent years. He just does not have the ability to create that union. He needs Fingon.
Well, but I remember when I first read the story, I felt very strongly this sense that I was being told that Maedhros is failing because we just cannot defeat evil on our own. That until the time comes for Providence to step in and do something, we're fighting the long defeat, and Maedhros still hasn't picked up on that fact yet.
He hasn't conceded that.
That's because the narrative voice of the Silmarillion is somebody who knows how the first age ends. So there's a lot of looking back in hindsight, this was never going to work. But that's obviously not what the characters who are living through it think. I don't think they're all defeatists and are like, we're just going to fight because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter if we all die. They honestly think they could win.
Yeah, but I think that Hurin comes to a realization that
the whole day shall come again means that he figures out.
Well, and his, he essentially is telling Turin, go, we've lost. We have lost this battle. I'm gonna die real quick, if that's okay with you.
But Turgon needs to live.
Yes.
And escape. Yeah. And obviously Huor has the prophetic awareness that from you and from me and star shall arise. So I think that we do see that there is definite hope in their final defeat there. They're not going into that defeat thinking it's all over. They're going into that defeat going, we are fighting to protect the hope of Beleriand.
And maybe Hurin could kind of start out where Maedhros is. He could kind of start out with look, I'm the guy, because he kind of brings the human contingent together, right? Because now the people of the House of Baor or a large contingent of them have been dropped into his lap. he has a relationship with the people, with the Haladin, and so he is kind of the linchpin that brings all that together in the way that Maedhros is trying to do for the elves.
Yes. So, okay. Backing up a second. Who is it? GD Tarian has made a couple points I wanted to mention. One is, before we just pass on from it, we don't have to talk about this more now. There'll be more to work out later on with this, but absolutely agree about how important it's going to be to make Huor a real character of his own. Because, again, we know almost nothing about Huor's personality. Hurin is almost always the speaker, right, between the two of them. Huor, I mean, how many lines does Huor get other than "from you and from me a new star shall arise," right? Like, does he ever even talk before that moment? Like, not much in any case, right? But
well, he's 3 years younger than his brother, so like when they're in Gondolin, he's the little brother.
Yeah.
I agree about him being a real character and not just let's figure out what Hurin's doing and then Huor will be the other voice in the room saying whatever we need him to say. I don't want that. And on the message boards, people were discussing what we could do with him and suggested that if Hurin was about endurance and was like rock, then Huor would be about fluidity, and so he'd be water, and that would obviously tie with the whole Olmo situation.
Right. Yeah.
So it might be a nice contrast that they're different temperaments and personalities, but similar in goals and ambitions, so that it's not like they're just somehow foils of each other, right?
Yep. Yeah. So. No, it'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
You'd be thinking. I mean, yeah, as you said, like it's impossible. See, and I would acknowledge that there's a chance that somebody could complain and say, okay, but we're still not considering Huor on his own. We're still considering him just like a vehicle towards Tuor, and Eärendil after him. But that's okay. Like he's not going to be the central figure, right? It's not like we're telling his whole story. And we do want to differentiate him. We do want to come to know him more as a character. But it is also true that his primary significance, like the two things that are going to be important about his character are going to be that he is going to be like his brother's right hand, and he is going to be the father of his destined son, the father and grandfather, of the destined people of whom he is the father and grandfather. Like those are his two really important contributions to the story. So we're obviously not going to hide from that. But yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to be thinking about Huor. In some ways, I feel like actually this season gives us something we haven't had really. I mean, we did this some in season 5 with kind of fleshing out human characters, right? But even there we were more limited, focused more limitedly. Andreth was our central figure, and there were some others around her whom we got to know a little bit more. We got to know some of Baron and Barahir's band, in that season and at the beginning of season 6, but of course not for very long, and then it's just Baron, right, for the rest of the time. This is really going to be, and we got some stuff with Hadar, right? But this is really going to be the first time we're going to have like a whole cast of human characters, all of whom are going to, we're Hurin and Morwyn and Huor and Rian and their parents and their cousins and the people of Brethil, in the family in Brethil. And it's not like we're going to spend equal time with everybody, but we're really going to be getting to know the whole group of them in ways that we've never really done before. And that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and the reason for that is timeline. This season's going to take place, well, after the Gondolin bit, which will take some time. Once they return from Gondolin, it's going to be 9 years to the Near Ninth.
Yes.
So the whole season will be, 12 of the 13 episodes of the season will be in 9 years. So the humans will stick with us the whole time.
Right.
But no one's going to be
aging
out of the story before we get to the end of the season. And that's the difference between season 5 and now. And the Baron and Luthien story is the turning point, because from here on, that'll be true of all of our human characters. All of our mortal characters can stick around for a full season. I mean, unless they die for other reasons.
Or more. Yeah.
Well, some of them are not going to last very long.
No, but some like Tour is going to be around for like 3 seasons or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be able to spend time with human characters now the same way we spent time with elves, whereas in the past we couldn't do that because they were aging out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That I think is going to be. It's fun just to kind of I don't know, sort of like acknowledge, just to kind of take a second to kind of wrap my brain around the implications of that kind of shift, because it is very different. So going back to the Union of Maedhros then, the link, of course, that the narrator makes, as Steve was just pointing out, is that it's all inspired by Beren and Luthien, right? The story of Beren and Luthien, which, gets Feanorians like Celegorm and Curufin saying things like, they've got a Silmaril, we've got to go after him, right? And they're grumbling and grudging about the Silmaril. Maedhros takes this in a completely different direction, right? Maedhros says, hey, look, after the Dagor Bragollach, it looks pretty grim, right? The union that, this was a question that G.T. Taurian was asking. We just had in season 5, Fingolfin trying to bring together a union of forces to attack, and it was a complete catastrophe, right? Like it didn't even...
it didn't get off the ground.
It didn't get off the ground, exactly.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't even happen. It was like preemptively destroyed, and they've not gotten stronger since then, have they? I mean, at least it doesn't look like it.
There's a lot more humans now.
There are a lot more humans now. Yeah.
If not from the birth rate, from the emigration situation.
Right. Yes. Right. Exactly. Yes. Okay. So anyway, but anyway, the point is what G.T. Taurian was pointing out, which I think is exactly correct. We have to make sure that at the beginning of the season, it doesn't look like, well, let's try again. Surely it can't go as badly as last time. Like, and of course, what the narrative gives us is that the turning point, how the people on the ground see the difference between now and the previous one, is Beren and Luthien, right? That they feel that. Do we think, by the way, that this means? Because thinking this through a little bit, right? So what? Beren and Luthien took a Silmaril from Morgoth. I mean, awesome. But so what? Like, what? We're Maedhros, right? What conclusions exactly are we drawing from that? Are we saying, so this proves that, like, yeah, Fingolfin wanted to attack, didn't seem like an awesome idea, wasn't super enthusiastic about at the time, and we never got the chance anyway. But you know what? Maybe Fingolfin was onto something. Maybe if we can actually pull it off, because Beren and Luthien have proven like he can be beaten. That's a strange conclusion, I have to say, on its own, because like but the Beren and Luthien story absolutely does not demonstrate is like military weakness of Thangorodrim, right? Like
no.
that is not a sensible lesson to take, like, because they didn't storm it, right?
I mean, at the very least, security could use a little beefing up there.
Right. So maybe you could send a spy in. I mean, that's a good reason to try to, like, a jailbreak or something, but that's not a good reason to say, therefore, an invasion, he's totally vulnerable to invasion. Like, is he? Maybe. Yeah. But,
Well, I think that there's a few more things in the picture. I mean, obviously, the news that Beren and Luthien stole a Silmaril is the talk of Beleriand.
Yeah.
But Maedhros turned down Fingolfin's offer when it was on the table, and then lived through the Dagor Bragollach.
Right.
So he's seen the, well, let's just wait till Morgoth attacks approach, and that didn't go great for them. Right. And Fingolfin followed it up with a one-on-one duel, and Maedhros had to be thinking, like, we could have done something differently here, right?
Yeah.
So I think Right. So I think that it's not just, wow, isn't it cool that they stole a Silmaril, but it's also, what lessons have we learned from the Dagor Bragollach? And one of them was waiting until Morgoth chooses the time to attack is not going to go well for us. Maybe we should choose the time.
Right. Right.
So,
yeah. So here's my other question. Does Maedhros or any of them suggest... So one possible conclusion you could draw from the Beren and Luthien story is, hey, Morgoth is slipping. Morgoth is weakening. He's lesser than he was before, which of course is actually true, in fact, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you put it together, right? Fingolfin, yeah, I mean, he killed Fingolfin, but like Fingolfin was a handful for him,
right?
One-on-one.
Yeah.
Fingolfin wounded him, right? The dude limps now, right? Like Fingolfin wounded him, and then Luthien goes and steals his lunch, right? I mean, like, so like this guy is not. So I'm thinking of the phrase in the text, right? Like that Morgoth was not unassailable.
Not unassailable.
And I don't think that can mean from a military standpoint, right? Because it's to apply that militarily doesn't make sense. But to say that Morgoth himself, like, this is not. This is an opponent who maybe has come down to be more within our reach than we think. We remember him from Valinor. Some of us do, right? But you know what?
When he absolutely steamrolled Finwë.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but maybe, you know what? Like, that our memories of Morgoth and even the things that we saw when we arrived back in season 3 are outdated. Like, that's antiquated information now. The recent information suggests, that is the duel with Fingolfin and the theft by Beren and Luthien, suggests, I mean, look, if Luthien could take him solo, if Fingolfin could hurt him and Luthien could subdue him, come on. If we all get together, we can make this happen, right? We can make this work. I think that, you know, so the weakness of Morgoth himself, personal weakness, would seem to be a big part of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's so to kind of break down like what's changed tactically speaking, because it's made very, very clear in the text that but for the treachery of the Easterlings, they still would have, at least the narrator seems convinced that they could have won.
They could have won, yeah.
And so for whatever reason, the narrator at least thinks that the plan is solid.
Yes. Yes.
So that means that Maedhros has been counting heads. There's an important change in the strategic situation since the Dagor Bragollach, and that's that Morgoth's forces are no longer holed up in Thangorajin.
Yes.
Right? They are spread out and occupying a large portion of the land now, which means that they can be cut up and dealt with. And in fact, that's exactly what happens. Yes. So then, I mean, I don't know why nobody thinks to bring along siege equipment. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, and I'm not sure.
I prefer to think we just don't mention the siege equipment in the narrative.
It's the fact that the narrator goes out of the way. Like, what was their plan? Like, why they just run up and beat on the doors? Like, oh yeah, this is totally going to work.
It's totally going to work. Yeah.
The importance of the two things that you've mentioned, Fingolfin's wounding of Morgoth and Luthien's subduing of him, I think that Maedhros is counting not only on the fact that Morgoth is weakened, but that everybody knows it. That it's a psychological tool in their arsenal now that they didn't have before. Even if Maedhros thought that they could have physically taken down Morgoth, which is now very clear that they can.
Yes.
Now everybody knows that. Morgoth's forces know it. All of the elves know it. The men know it. Everybody knows it, and so that changes the landscape of the morale for his side and for their opposition. In addition, Morgoth has lost. Like, they have to know They may not know that it was Sauron at Tolsirion, but they have to know that there was a major lieutenant of Morgoth's there who was defeated and possibly lost to him. Like, everybody knows that Draugluin is dead.
Right.
You know, like everybody probably knows. Yeah, everybody knows that Thorngwethel is dead. There's this huge hole in Morgoth's, like crime syndicate organization.
Right. He still has the dragon, and he still has the Balrogs, but that's it.
Right.
I mean, that counts for something.
It's a lot. Yeah. It's still a lot. Yeah. Exactly.
But Maedhros has reason to suspect that the dragon cannot be counted upon.
Right.
To follow orders and to do the strategically responsible thing. Because he knows
nobody's more familiar with the dragon than the Feanorians.
Right.
So it's like, yes, he's very dangerous, and you don't want to ignore live dragons in your battle plan, but at the same time,
we could probably deal with him.
Right. Morgoth can't count on him to effectively engage either.
He's not a strategist. He's not a battle strategist.
Yeah. Right. And in fact, one pinprick and he's out.
Which is indeed what happens.
Immediately.
Yeah, he pieces out of the battle.
That's what I mean.
He gets stabbed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yet, does Morgoth have more dragons?
There's no evidence that there are more dragons until later on. I don't. Is it? No, were there dragons? Does it? It's in that when he empties. They're included in the list when he empties Angband, right?
Yeah, we need dragons now, and we're going to need them for the fall of Gondolin. So I don't think they're going to be
for the
new.
Fall of Gondolin, for sure.
Yeah, but they're not going to be new for that. They're going to be new
but
for
they're
this.
probably
dragons. From
they're
the
probably
brood
still
of
baby dragons at this point. They are season 4 Glaurung.
Exactly,
dragons.
that's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they're there, but maybe not.
Than that.
Yeah, but multiple baby dragons suggest that you're about to have an army of full-size dragons, which is an argument in favor of can we attack now, please?
Sooner rather than later, yes. Yes.
Like, don't wait for all those dragons to grow up.
Well, I think that he, again, he can be counting heads and being like, okay, there is never going to be a better time than right now.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think that Maedhros' approach to the whole thing is a bit on the practical side. He is being forced a bit by circumstances. It's not like he just sat down one day and was like, hey, it would be great. Let's go attack Morgoth, right? Like, there's
it was
reasons...
it was more of a, I don't want to attack Doriath. That clearly seems like a terrible thing to do.
Right.
Can this other thing work?
Can I point my brothers in a different direction? Yes.
Exactly. And he can use that to get Fingon on board. It's like, look, help me attack Morgoth.
Help me help you.
Because if you don't, you do realize what's going to happen next, right? He doesn't have to threaten to attack Doriath.
Right.
No.
But he can at least hint that is indeed what would happen, So I'm not saying he would do that to Fingon. They're good buddies. They can come to an understanding. And that's the other
thing, of course, that I think is going to be really fun, is that it's been a long time since we've really had cause to remember that Maedhros and Fingon are really close, right? And so for to have this season also be about the refreshing of their friendship, the renewal of their friendship, and their working together, that's certainly a nice little sort of perk to the storylines here. I completely agree. The other thing I was going to add, Nick, about the tactical situation, it's interesting how, if you think about the overall trajectory, right? You think about the pre-Dagor Bragollach, leaguer. That's the word I was looking for. Leaguer of Angband, right? Situation on the one hand, and you look at the post-Nirnaeth, almost all of Beleriand overrun by orcs, and only a few islands of peace left, while everyone else is oppressed and overrun. We're right in between those two states here, right? On the one hand, yes, like the orcs are rampaging over huge portions of Beleriand since Tolsirion fell, right? It's not reached the stage that it will even under Glaurung when Glaurung is in Nargothrond, right? But still, and Dorthonion is completely overrun, right? So there are a lot of orcs, but a lot of them are not in Angband, right? But more importantly, they don't have real leaders, right? They don't have a strategist. So Dorthonion could be crawling with orcs. And if you're the Feanorian armies, right, you're going to march across Anfauglith towards the enemy. Are you worried? Like, there may be thousands of orcs in Dorthonion. Are you worried about that? No. What are they going to do? They've got no generals. Are they going to attack you from behind? What? Who's leading them? Right? Who's doing that? There's no, with Sauron gone, there's nobody left anymore. There's Gothmog and there's Glaurung. Right? But neither one of them is going to go gather up together and rally the rest of his armies. So he is left, if they can just cut straight across like they can from where they're positioned, where Maedhros and Fingon, combining their names disastrously into Maedhros, are both positioned. They can just go straight to Thangorodrim, right, between the two of them, and ignore all of the, and then once they've, thrown down Thangorodrim, they can hunt down the rest of the orcs, at their leisure in the subsequent centuries, right? But it does, in this way, the argument could be made that the very victory of Morgoth earlier on in the Dagor Bragollach has served to weaken his position militarily. Mm-hmm. Especially when compounded by the loss of Sauron.
Yeah.
Right.
Who was always the brains of the operation when it came to, planning.
Yeah, getting things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about it being Fingolfin's plan take 2.
Right.
Like, I think there's enough stuff for the characters to discuss about why they think now is the time.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And the armies of the Easterlings have to be huge.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Huge.
Because they have to completely destroy any hope they have of making this battle turn out.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they have to be a game changer either way.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, like, because he believes he has the alliance of the Easterlings, Maedhros thinks they have an enormous edge that they didn't have before. But the armies of the Easterlings also have to be big enough to actually threaten and overthrow the Feanorians, for crying out loud, the Feanorian army. Even though, I mean, attacking from behind, still, they have to outnumber the Feanorians significantly, like 3-1 or 5-1, in order to be any kind of a real threat to the Feanorian army.
Especially since they don't all turn traitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to be the whole
contingency
of Easterlings. So I agree that it has to be a pretty overwhelming force. And then Gondolin has an overwhelming force as well. So those 2 armies are both Easterling armies and Gondolin.
Yeah.
Okay, those 3 armies are the biggest armies on the field, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, there's 10,000
from Gondolin.
Yeah. Gondolin,
mm-hmm.
Not that sounds like an enormously precise number I would have had, but
that's
yes,
fair.
Yes. Though I would say there, it's not about, with them also, it's sort of less about the numbers. The numbers are important.
They're there at all.
Right. And so like what it means for the morale of the people, but they are not merely numerous. Like, they are enormous. Like that.
They're well equipped in their elves.
They're well equipped. They're well equipped. Right.
Right. Well, that's in my head. They've always, when they show up, they have the best armor and weapons that they could met, because they've had nothing to do but practice this.
Yes.
This entire time.
Yeah. I think, by the way, we should we need to unveil the whole like blue glowing blades
Swords glow
thing
blue
in this
Yes.
battle, right? Like
Yes.
this is new technology that they've developed. I mean,
Yeah.
because Nick, I was thinking of that passage in The Hobbit, right? When Bilbo realizes that Sting glows for the first time, and he thinks
Yes.
it's quite fine to think that he has a blade from Gondolin, right?
Mhm.
And to kind of take that line and sort of lean into it a little bit, right? To say like, yeah, like blades from Gondolin, like that was now. The Feanorians, their technology is great, right? So like, it's
but no
excellent.
glowing swords.
No glowing
Right.
swords.
Well,
yeah.
the Feanorians I always see as like the most disciplined soldiers. Are the Feanorians. They have this phenomenal heavy infantry and heavy cavalry,
Right.
and they're just unstoppable every time that they show up.
Yeah.
They're just obliterating anything that gets stuck between those two things.
Right. Right.
But the idea that and if we can talk about why the technology of the Gondolin is so advanced later.
Yeah,
but
that will be fun, actually.
Yes.
But remember, we have like 3 seasons to have stuff happening in Gondolin where nothing else is really occurring. So we'll have plenty of opportunities to explore this.
Somehow Morgoth fails to track down these 10,000 people when they make their way back to Gondolin.
Yeah, because they couldn't get through the Fens of Sarek.
Because 2 guys were there.
Yeah. That's the story we're telling.
Well,
as the Eagles helped, I'm sure there's going to be some, mists of Ulmo helping. We'll make it work.
I'm put in mind of the line in Cyrano de Bergerac where he where somebody asks him, why did they send like 45 guys to attack this one dude, and Cyrano de Bergerac says, because he is a friend of mine.
Right. Well, I mean, the other thing
can't discount Hurin.
Right. Can't discount Hurin. I mean, but the other thing I'm always mindful of too is like in battle stories, when you're describing the movements of armies, it always sounds like, a dude taking a walk over a really short distance, when in fact, like, this would have been happening over like hours, so like the whole thing of like, and then the Gondolin left and the men of Sarek and the men of Dor-lómin turned, like the men of Dor-lómin could well be fighting in the Fens of Sarek for like days, like it's I mean, this could be, Thermopylae hip deep in the swamp, basically, is like what the Fens of Sarek could be. We've already kind of set it up, in so, like the geography of the Fens of Sarek to some extent in this way.
Yeah, we keep having every single battle happen in the Fens of Sarek.
Exactly.
Hey, well, this time they're going to have their backs to the Fens because they can use those earthworks going the other direction.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's but yeah, so like when Gondolin leaves, again, the whole description sounds like the battle of the Fens of like the Nirnaeth Arnodiad happens in a day. Right, in like one single day, and it's not going to happen in one single day. So like, so yeah, so the Gondolin turning around and like, hightailing it off towards Gondolin while 2 dudes and a few other dudes with them hold off the armies, and then nobody can catch up, to the army of 10,000. It's not. I mean, again, they could have left a week ago, right?
It's a good thing that the head of the vampires got killed. I'm just saying.
It sure is. Yeah. Though again, we can have some Eagle air support, when it comes to that. But anyway, so there definitely ways to sort of manage that. But okay, so what is the proportion, would you say, population wise? So when the Easterlings come over, they come all over, or is it just the armies? Do they bring their families?
We're going to need to work out that whole storyline.
Okay.
Because it's not just one group.
Sauron and
stuff. The Easterlings is
okay.
not a single unified group.
No.
So they can come in 2 different batches. They could have very different motivations. They could get recruited by the elves to come over.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Sauron's obviously up to a lot over there, so things are happening.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what if?
Hang on.
Okay.
Is
So
this
what
a
if
next episode
yeah,
topic?
yeah, it is. Yeah. I'll wait.
Look, see how
Just don't
disciplined I'm
forget.
being, Marie? I'm being so disciplined.
I appreciate
So
that.
next episode, just to tell people, next episode we're already planning. We're going to talk about Sauron, what he does in the east, and Galadriel and what's going on with her. Like those are the two. Those are the two big. And we talked about this last week briefly. Those are the two big storylines that we've got to start cracking open. Like we've now reached the black hole portion of both of their stories in Tolkien's Legendarium, right? What on earth is Sauron doing, and what on earth is Galadriel doing? Like that's not a black hole in the sense that there's nothing there, I guess, but there's conflicting things there. Anyway,
so nobody let me forget about Galadriel falling right into Sauron's hands. Let me just
no problem.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah, don't worry.
We'll
There's
that.
The other option is that Galadriel is somehow involved with the Fëanorian side of things this season as well.
Could well be.
So we have things to discuss with what direction we put Galadriel in.
Yep, this is me trying not even to think about it right now. But
okay.
Anyway, but the point is with the Easterlings. So here's the reason I'm thinking, because it's I hadn't really thought that through in that way. That is, I hadn't really thought through how big the army of the Easterlings really does have to be. So we're gonna be suggesting, aren't we, that the population of the Easterlings is massively larger than the population of the Edain combined?
Yes.
Especially since the House of Beor has fallen on hard times already. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the way we showed the three houses of the Edain come over, the first group was the very smallest. The House of Beor was like one little group of guys when we met them. And then the largest was the last group, which became the House of Hadar. But they were the Estolad people at the time.
Yes.
So we've shown that like the first groups that made it over were the tiny groups, but the larger groups move slower. So they hadn't gotten all the way to the coast yet. And so it would make sense that the Easterlings would be the largest group yet, like by a significant margin.
Yeah.
Because they're coming hundreds of years after the original group.
And they're being pushed out by some massive Morgoth worshipping.
There's a whole storyline in the
east. Empire out there in the east.
Yeah.
Can I put in a request that we have somebody who is like a warlord whose imperial capital is at Bree?
Oh no.
I like it.
Anyway,
it'll get you your Tom Bombadil cameo this season. That's all I
will.
gotta say to that.
Tom Bombadil's gonna be easy to work in here.
Yeah.
In fact, we could have him interact with with a real character for the first time.
With Galadriel.
Galadriel could visit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
Anyway, okay. This is so again, but while I'm not trying to get too distracted in thinking about Easterling plotlines, which will be great fun, but the reason I'm saying this again, it's making me reimagine Beleriand and Northern Beleriand, because Northern Beleriand is going to, like, leading up to the Near Ninth, is going to be like overrun with Easterlings. I mean, it's going to be chock full with Easterlings. In order for them to have the size of army that they're going to have.
There's a reason they were upset about getting stuffed in Dorloman afterwards.
Right.
Like everybody else who's offered Dorloman is like, wow, what a great place to live. I'm so happy to be here. The Easterlings were mad about it. So you have to assume that the House of Hadar moving in was like, all this land, this is all wonderful. We can, and the Easterlings are like cramped. So it's a very, very large group.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's just so kind of just talking through and imagining my way through that to kind of orient myself towards that, because I'd never really considered the question of how many Easterlings there were, but really.
So if we talk about, I mean, there could be like 1 million people all told. After
huge,
after the I'm not talking about the fighting people. I'm talking about like just the entire population.
Yeah.
I mean, and you could fit that many people easy on the just west of the mountains there.
There's a lot of space.
Sure.
But still,
Laughlin.
it would be full. I mean, it would be full of folks in ways that it never was. So yeah. It's a very different thing. Okay, cool. So
they could even drop some hints. The Feanorians would kind of be perfect people to drop hints about how. Well, I mean, there won't be as many of them left after the battle. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And speaking of, we are going to eventually have to plan like end game things for some of these cultures.
Yes.
So naturally, there's multiple groups of Easterlings. The ones who were faithful and didn't join in the rebellion, like, do they survive this battle? If they do, where do they go? We'll have to work on that.
Rohan eventually, yes.
I mean, right. Mm-hmm. But so do they end up back over the mountains? Are they somewhere in Balerion for the rest of the story? Like, what are we doing with them? And then also, like, the Forest of Brethil.
Yep.
After Turin's death, what happens to those folks? I mean, are there any of them going to survive to go to Numenor? Or are we going to get rid of them in some other way? Just things to think about. So yeah, we do have some end of Balerion decisions to make eventually.
For sure. But yes, thinking about the trajectories of their cultures and awesome. That'll be great fun. So let's think about. Well, all right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my list of storylines here. We talked about Gondolin to some extent. Not a lot of extent, though. So because Gondolin, if Hurin and Huor are the most logical, like, sort of framing characters of the whole season, Turgon is the second most logical framing character for this season. So I don't want to undersell the importance of the Gondolin story, because really, this is going to be, we got stuff with Arthel, right? We got stuff with Arthel and the Maegwyn story, which we worked in, Aeol and such. But the primary emphasis, I'm thinking about Turgon's story. Really, like this, the identity of Gondolin, the mission, like, what is Turgon's current mission statement, in Gondolin?
Right. Because
what stage is he at here precisely?
Yeah, I don't know how much we want to set up his decision to join the Near Ninth, or how much we want it to surprise people, but there should be some feeling of will he or won't he in the season, which means we need to be grappling with what is he trying to accomplish here, what is he doing, and how has the death of Arthel affected him. So I think that Hurin and Huor can bring that out in him a bit.
That was season 5, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we haven't really seen Gondolin in season 6. So it was the last time we saw him he was mourning
Aeol, right?
Right. So he was mourning the death of Arthel, and then Fingolfin dies, and then we see a little cameo when the eagles fly over Gondolin with Baron.
Yeah, the burial. Yeah.
So we've had a few little glimpses of him, but mostly we haven't seen him since the death of Aeol.
No, that makes good sense. Okay, so the primary story, as far as Gondolin itself was concerned, the primary story was Arathel's restlessness. And her sense, help me remember, because I know we kind of beefed Arthel and her storyline up a little bit, especially at the beginning. What she wanted was to contribute, right? Like we're going to waste here, right? We're hiding and doing nothing. We're not contributing to the team at all. That was her basic angle, right?
She thought that Turgon had lost sight of his vision, because he's like, my mission statement from Ulmo was go make a safe place and keep the people safe and protected there.
Right.
And he's like, cool, did that. And she is of the opinion that the whole purpose of doing that was to be ready for when the time came. And she didn't think he was doing enough of preparing for that day, or even acknowledging that day would come, because the focus seems so much on Gondolin and not on what was outside Gondolin. So that was the source of her restlessness.
This suggests that the primary Gondolin story of this season is Turgon coming over the course of the, first half or whatever of the season to the conclusion, this is the day. The day has come. This is when we go for, this is what we've been preparing for. This has been the point. This is why Omo led us to this shelter, because, Arthel was impatient. He's not going to say this publicly, right? But Arthel was impatient, but he has not forgotten her words, right?
Right.
And he realizes, yes, like there was a purpose. His absolute isolationism isn't going to happen until after the Near Knife, right?
Right.
When this fails.
I mean, he did tell Eowyn and Maeglin that they were there forever now.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not.
But
I'm not
he's
saying
going to let Hurin
isolationism
and
is
Huor go.
wholly new. I'm just saying the idea.
But he's letting Hurin and Huor go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, you're right. The isolationism is not absolute at this time. After the Near Knife, yeah, it's quite stringent.
Dedicated to isolationism and only isolationism. Like we're just gonna. Now nothing else exists except Gondolin, and our mission is now to thrive here and ignore the rest of the world. But that's not his mission right now.
Right. So the idea is that this season we need to kind of explore his grappling with Arathel's ideas and figuring out where he stands on that. And I do think we'll want his actual arrival at the Near Knife to be some level of unexpected.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
But there's always been a kind of a question in the story of how he knows. Like, who invited him to that?
Eagles are handy that way, I suppose.
They are handy, but like it never says who reached out or, found an eagle and was like, gee, if you could find my brother and tell him I'm about to go into this huge battle, that would be super appreciated. Like,
I know who. Dairon.
Fingon. Oh, Dairon. Okay.
Last scene near Gondolin, right?
He's
encountering eagles.
Dairon is friends of eagles now.
We'll go between there, right?
Okay.
But
anyway, the point is,
yeah.
we could develop a story, right?
Yeah, no,
where
where
someone tries to get news to Gondolin and doesn't know if it got through or not, and then Turgon shows up. So
yeah. By the way, you know who developed the blue sword technology, right? Maeglin, obviously. Yeah.
With the hilt of Fingolfin's sword, which somehow found its way into his hand.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No,
but yeah, I mean, I'm thinking. So, like, I'm looking forward to the scene where we see Maeglin forging Sting.
I
love it.
I want Sting to remain an anonymous little knife.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in Gondolin, and there's 1,000 just like it, and we have no idea which one is Sting. No, I'm serious. Like it's like standard
Nobody said
issue.
that he only made one. He made lots of them.
Yeah.
And
okay, fine.
Now, of course, the one we see him making happens to be Sting, but
fine. Yeah, that's fine. I want there to be an everyman character to Sting that is not true for all the other famous name swords.
Yeah, and so, oh my gosh, so we've okay. So the only thing we've seen of Sting up until this point has been the hilt sticking up out of Bilbo's pants when he's back on his way back from the Lonely Mountain. Right?
In season 1 frame. Yeah.
And so that's really interesting because like we'll see it and like everybody will have one, right? But there'll be some people who are like, wait a minute. Hang on, pause that.
That would be fun. Yep. But
yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we definitely have some stuff to explore in Gondolin. Yes, Phil,
he throws Sting into a heap of identical
Yeah.
daggers. Exactly.
We show him forging Sting, and then he tosses it onto a heap of identical knives, just like it. Yeah. Exactly.
That I'm fine with. Totally fine with that.
Yeah. No. Anyway, no. I was just thinking that like Maeglin is the answer to one of the chief answers to why and how has Gondolindrum technology increased, improved, Well, Myglin's
I
there
mean,
now.
it doesn't hurt that they've got some of the premier Noldor craftsmen there.
Oh yeah,
but,
no, I mean, like there's
but
plenty of
Myglin
awesomeness already, a baseline there. But
but Eowl had knowledge that the Noldor don't. So
Yep.
Myglin
Yep.
has a unique perspective he can bring.
Absolutely. And it also, of course, would help to show why anybody would, because we know that Myglin is going to have a following too, like he's going to have henchmen and such. And there's a good reason why he would have followers, because he's awesome. I mean, there's much that is awesome about Myglin. We can't have Myglin just be, slimy, nothing but slimy dude,
Right. That's kind of a boring story. I don't think we're gonna redeem Myglin, but we can make him interesting.
We just make him great rather than like
good,
annoying. Yeah. I mean, in fact, like it would be even fun in some ways to have Idril's take on Myglin seem like
unfair,
deviant. Yeah. In some way. Yeah. Like, I mean, she like nobody else gets why she doesn't think Myglin is awesome.
Okay. Yes, I would like to see some Turgon, Myglin, Idril interactions in this season to kind of establish their baseline.
Yep.
Before we bring Tuor into the picture. Totally. We are going to add more characters to Gondolin after the Nirnaeth, as Turgon's going to kind of clean up the battlefield and take people with him. So that's how. Well, no, that's how Rogren ends up.
That's how Rog gets there.
Yeah. So we'll be adding some people later, but I do think that seeing Turgon's mission vision shifting would be a helpful part of his story now.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important. And also, I mean, not that we have to go out of our way to make the Nirnaeth more crushing, but in order to,
hammer it home.
Yeah, to really building up the destiny of Gondolin, right? That like this is the achievement of the destiny of Gondolin. The day has come, right? That this is when, we fulfill our purpose. This is what we have been for all along. This is the great moment. And then it fails, right? Or seems to fail in any case. Like there's, which leads to the important question: what is actually, if they're wrong about that, what is the main thing that they are meant to do? Like, what is the, if we're, because so, and this, by the way, I mean, I'm just going to say it, I think is a weakness in the published Silmarillion itself. We've talked about this many times before, that in the early versions of the Gondolin story, Turgon in particular was the destined overthrower of Morgoth. Like that was the point of Gondolin. It fails still, like, so, and that makes Turgon's choice to reject the advice of Ulmo, which was not run away, but attack, right? And the stuff that Ulmo says to Tuor in the novel, the unfinished Tuor story, makes me think he's still toying with some of those ideas, or like thinking about, continuing and to develop some of those ideas. But they're not in the published text. They're not in the final versions that we have, which are still super early. Anyway, point is, when that goes away, right? When Tolkien decides that Turgon's destiny is not, in fact, to like his calling, rather, is not, in fact, the calling which he fails to keep, is not, in fact, to march out and attack Morgoth and defeat him. What exactly is his mission? And when, like, so, or let me ask the question another way. What does listening to Ulmo accomplish? If he doesn't reject Ulmo and they just pack up and leave, what comes next? What happens next? So, where do they go? What do they do? What do they accomplish?
The one thing that Turgon is doing post Nirnaeth is sending ships to Valinor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part where he didn't give up. He is totally isolationist,
But you're not
except for
wholly
that.
given up. Yeah.
Yeah, there is that idea of, but there is some hope somewhere, even if it doesn't seem to be in Beleriand. So I think that, and the hope ends up being Arendelle. So if they had gotten out, then they could have all gone down to the havens and established the havens earlier, and Turgon would be there with Círdan, and Turgon and Círdan could talk about sending ships and get that sorted out, and maybe Arendelle could sail a little earlier. Not much earlier. The guy's only 20-some when he does sail.
Exactly right. Let's get the 7-year-old a boat. I agreed. I mean, it seems to, like I said, it seems to me actually like a weakness in the published Silmarillion story.
I think what we see from Almost Warning is it's kind of a mercy, like,
right,
hey,
if you don't,
something really bad's about to happen there, and being your friend, I wanted to tell you so you would have the chance to get out, right? So the warning isn't necessarily going to save Beleriand or anything, but it would save Turgon,
right,
and Turgon's people for a time. I mean, how long are they going to hang out at the havens before Morgoth shows up? So it's not a permanent solution or anything, but it is an offer of mercy.
I'm rather surprised he doesn't show up before the War of Wrath. Like he had him. All he had to do was just come in there and show up. Nope.
Well, Morgoth never had a navy. So having ships
till the end.
Yeah. But having ships does help. And that's what we showed back in season 3 with sacking the towns on the coast. Is you can sack them all you want. The people just flee in their ships, wait until you leave, and then come back and build their town again. And you don't really destroy anything. So the Isle of Valar isn't really a place Morgoth can easily get to.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry, I was laughing at Autoflagellator's comment. As a friend, I'm concerned you're loving too well the works of your own hands. Like it's some kind of intervention by Homo here.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
But it this will end badly for you. Just thought you should know.
Which is fine, but okay, anyway, but of course we did what we did back in season 5 was to basically take elements of Turgon's original purpose and give it to Fingolfin.
Yes.
Right, that kind of picture, that kind of destiny. And
so we were able to preserve that.
Right, some portion of it. Now, of course, they weren't interpreting that right either. Like they also, their calendars were off there too, right? It was not, in fact, the day. But I think we don't have to solve this today, but I think that there are two things that we need to decide. One is, again, how Turgon's own understanding of the mission statement evolves over time. And what the actual purpose, what Olmo has a plan from day one, right? Olmo's playing the long game with Gondolin. What's his plan? We can say it's just preservation. He's just like, hey, I like Turgon. I want to give him a sweet pad, and I want to protect him and his people. But I'm a little dissatisfied with that as the only answer to the question.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is Arendelle. So, I mean, he said, go build a city. And by the way, leave a suit of armor with these specifications.
There is a plan. Yeah.
There. Like it's clear that sending Tuor was always part of Olmo's plan.
Yes.
And therefore Arendelle was always part of Olmo's plan. But yeah, I think we do need to work out a little bit more about that. Because we discussed it back in season 5, but yeah, it might be time to revisit that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But as far as what is useful for tonight, thematically, the idea that now's the time, if that's going to be part of the Gondolin story, that could probably be the part of the Union of Maedhros story and the Hurin and Huor. It all would pretty much add up to that, because the two main elements of this season are that they need to form a union. So they all have to agree to work together on this. And that now is the time.
Now
the day has come. Yeah. So if we want to lean into the day has come, Like
that does seem to be, because you can hear in different voices and with different inflections, right? Turgon and Gondolin saying the day has come. Maedhros saying, dudes, the day has come, right? This is now is, the time is ripe. And Hurin saying, coming out from Gondolin, right, and saying, now is the time, i.e. before I die of old age, right?
Yeah,
Now is the time, right? So, I mean, all of them would agree.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Right, exactly. All of them would agree on that. Yeah, but I'm still not sure that's the theme, though. Well, hang on. We'll come back to this. Let's talk about the dwarves briefly, because we don't have to.
I didn't mean to decide it. More just to throw it on the table.
No. Yeah. That's definitely a trend is clearly forming there, and I think that's pretty clear. So, with the story in Belegost, we care about this especially because we are. Hey, Dave, welcome. Welcome.
Made it.
You made it. So we're going through different storylines. We've talked about Hurin and Huor, the Union of Maedhros, sort of the strategic elements there. We talked about the Easterlings a bit, though we're saving some of that for next time. And we were just talking about Gondolin. So I was just transitioning to talking about the dwarves of Belegost. Because obviously we know where the dwarves of Belegost story is going to come to, right? We have like one fixed point in the dwarves of Belegost story in this season, and that is Azachal stabbing the Glaurung from beneath. So the climactic fight between them, and we've been setting that up a little bit, right, with the dwarves and the dragon and the treasure, right? That was season 5, right? So, that the dragon and the dwarves have a certain amount of conflicting interests, right, and are on some level kind of natural enemies. But it's kind of like the connection there is we've started to establish a little bit of a connection, but it's still pretty weak. How do we want to build up to that? Like, how do we have like both the recruiting of the dwarves as allies to the extent that they're going to march into battle, which is a big deal. I mean, totally unprecedented. Even in the Norn days, we weren't getting this kind of collaboration between elves.
No, and
not since the first battle under the stars,
Denethor's battle, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the real significant part of the story. Like, yes, obviously there's animosity between the dwarves and the dragon, but the real issue is that the dwarves have for a long time decided we can safely sit in our mountains and you all can fight that war and we will happily supply you with equipment.
Right.
So you want to buy some weapons from us? We'll sell you weapons. You want to buy some armor from us? We'll sell you some armor. You want some help building some fortifications? We'll send out a crew to help you build some stone stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they're willing to help and they want to fight Morgoth, but they don't want to die over it.
Right.
It's never been to them their war.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their people weren't the targets. So why would
their
they?
People aren't that threatened. Like, no one has been invading underground yet. Again, the dragon, like, we can have them have a conversation to say that dragon really was getting into Caranthir's treasure, right? This is clearly a thing with the dragon, like, because it's the first dragon ever, so people don't know about dragons and treasure yet. But they've learned this now. And so there can be fears, like, if that dragon tried to come here, he could totally come in here. And if he came in here, it would be bad, right?
Well, I mean, what's the best offensive weapon against people hiding in caves? Is a flamethrower. And Morgoth has the biggest.
Well, and it's also like going after rabbits with a ferret as well.
Yeah.
Like you can't march your armies of orcs underground, but you could send a dragon down there, right?
Yeah. So I think that the dwarves have to come to the conclusion, this is our war. If we don't join in this fight, they'll be at our gate next. And
in particular, Belegost. And again,
the day has come.
The day has come.
Yeah.
The day has come. The day has come that, and theirs can be kind of secondary in the sense of like they see day coming for all the elves, and they realize like, okay, if we do nothing, like we're not guaranteed to just ride this out. If we just supply weapons and hope for the best and let, them mind their own thing. If Morgoth wins and the elves get wiped out, we will be in danger because the dragon's going to come eventually.
Right. If it's made clear to them that Maedhros is engaged in an all or nothing proposition, then it's like, okay, well, that's the day has come. Like, that's it.
Right.
What, because once they're gone, eventually Morgoth is going to come for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nogrod has not gotten to the conclusion that it's their fight yet, but I think Belegost gets there this season and commits.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, we'll send some guys to help you out, but we're sending our full army and the king is leading it and all that. Yeah.
Right. And the main difference, so apart from geography between Nogrod and Belegost, right? Nogrod is so far away that they still feel totally secure. Belegost
Belegost is a little further north and Nogrod's a little further south, but it's not a significant difference if you're, say, a dragon.
Right. Well, but that's what I was thinking is contact with the dragon. The elves of Belegost have
True.
The people in Nogrod they're still thinking orc armies. They're like, let the orc armies try to get into our mountains. It's not going to happen. Right. And if it does, we'll fight them in the tunnels and it'll be ugly, but it will win. But the dwarves of Belegost are like, okay, no, the dragon is a difference maker. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that I think is probably enough. We do need, who's our ambassador to the dwarves? We need somebody
There's somebody that we've been kind of grooming for this. He was at Himring. I forget his name.
Oh,
the dwarf?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that we named him, but we might have. There was a foreman who was helping Maedhros put secret tunnels under Himring. And he was present in Himring during the Dagor Bragollach. So he kind of got to see battle firsthand and got caught up in it. And he would be a good spokesman for some of that stuff. We also managed to get ourselves to everyman dwarves who saw Glarung in season 6.
Yes.
They're very minor characters. They were just two guys who were standing around and the dragon went by, but we can certainly bring them back and have them tell people about the dragon they saw. We can use those characters as a random dwarf in the thick of things.
Or our dwarf ambassador could find them, could meet them, and then deploy them, basically.
Right.
As testimony for the king. Would we have a primary elf contact?
I'm assuming that Maedhros is gonna be coordinating with Belegost because there's at least some friendship there. And he's not sending Caranthir. But he could send one of his other brothers. Maglor could be ambassador to Belegost if we wanted.
Thornley is the name in the script.
Thornley, yes.
I don't know if he ever gets named actually, but yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So we have some characters we can work with. The Easterlings obviously are going to deal with Caranthir, but we don't necessarily have a role for Celegorm and Curufin in everything that's about to happen. And they don't seem like the kind of guys who would just sit there.
Right.
So they're going to be doing something.
Yeah, so we'll think about them. Is Amros going to make an appearance?
Yeah, he's going to fight in the battle.
Yeah.
So he's on board somehow, eventually.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there do we have the dwarf connection, the dwarf alliance? Is that spontaneous? One day Maedhros finds himself surprised and delighted to find the dwarf ambassador showing up and saying, we're in? Or is there going to be is there going to be an elf advocate who's going to reach out to them? And
it's going to have to be a part of his story to because otherwise it's not going to be as valuable.
Right.
Yeah, and
free armies aren't valuable.
The general idea is that,
especially if they're green,
there's some political machinations going on this season, and some of them are going to fail. Like, obviously, Doriath is not exactly going to get on board with the let's attack Morgoth situation, but Beleg and Mablung are going to show up. So even though Doriath's not on board, like, there's still a story there. Why do those two guys go? Do they show up with the people for Brethil and they're just tagging along with the men? I don't know. Who knows? We'll come up with something, but
so I'm thinking, where are we we don't need to talk too much about Nargothrond and Doriath because those are comparatively minor stories in the season, but just for a moment, to what extent is there a division in either one of those places? And I'm inclined to think, like, when last we left Thingol, he was recovering as a character, right? He'd learned his lesson. He'd reached his, nadir with the sending Baron to his death and imprisoning his daughter. But by the end, he was getting with it more, right? And
so how do we backslide him?
Well, or do we quickly? That's what I'm thinking. Like it.
Yeah.
I mean, there can be perfectly good reasons. I mean, like, Melian could be, everyone's like, the day has come, and Melian could be like, actually, no, it hasn't. Right?
Yeah.
And Thingol's like, we actually think the day has not come, and y'all are wrong, and nobody listens to them. Right?
Yeah, and that would be a non-terrible thing for Thingol to do, right?
Yes. I mean, it's still not
Beleg
a
and
great
Mablung
look.
are like, but
yeah. It's not going to do anything for his popularity among the Noldor, right? But
no, but I mean, I don't think friendship with the Noldor is his main goal at this point.
No, it's not. His self-esteem isn't really invested in that. I agree.
He's not wildly interested in ingratiating himself with anybody.
No.
As far as sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, there can be some language thrown his way about the possession of the Silmarillion. Like, hey, so we're gonna do this thing. You would do well to join us, and while you're at it, return the Silmarillion.
That's right.
That would be a good thing for you to do while you're joining our armies on the field of battle.
I could see there being some tension in both directions there. As, of course, he will certainly have not forgotten the memorable letter from Celegorm and Curufin, right? When they were holding his daughter hostage. So,
which only serves to undermine this letter, which is in fact important and not entirely in the wrong in the same way.
Right. Not in the same way, for sure. Yeah. So we can give him mixed reasons, like, he's not just being a jerk, refusing to cooperate, but he needn't be a hero either.
Yeah, I think that we don't want to make him a jerk all over again. We just did that story with him, but he's still Thingol. I mean, we don't have to change who he is.
Exactly. I kind of like the idea, because of the way which, like, Beleg and Mablung only, like, 2 people go. They'd have to go in defiance of the king, and like, it would be weird even for, like, not even one single one. Like, they're captains. Like, none of their followers go with them either. Like, so, but if the 2 of them were on some kind of, like, diplomatic journey in Brethil, and we're just like, hey, we'll go, like, because they're elves. Like, yeah, we'll be gone for a year or something. They'll never miss us at home, right? Well, so we'll just, we'll tag along. It gives them a great opportunity to go into a cause which they might believe in more, or they might be willing to support more than Thingol, but it's not an act of defiance on their part because they're not there, right?
I mean, it also wouldn't be completely unreasonable for them to kind of be like, oh, king, like, we think this is really important, and we understand your reasons for not wanting to participate, but we we kind of feel like we need to. And he's like, fine, just go. I don't care. You know, try not to die, please.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have to tell that story of how do the two of them end up at the battle when Thingol is very adamantly not on board.
Yeah. No,
and then
I kind of like the field trip explanation.
But as far as Nargothrond goes, I think the animosity towards the Feanorians plays a large role in Orodreth's decision. And the fear that Curufin put into the people of Nargothrond of, you better keep it secret, keep it safe, or else you're all gonna die. Like, they took that to heart. So Nargothrond is also on lockdown, and you know, not quite Gondolin levels, but pretty close. And therefore Gwynder's point of view of, but my brother was captured in the Dagor Bragollach, and I fought alongside Finrod. Like, he has these personal reasons to want to join a fight and to personally, kill Morgoth, which is going to work out super great for him. But But I think in Nargothrond, we mostly want to follow Gwynder's story this season. I don't think we really care what Orodreth thinks. Like, he's there. We'll have him as a minor character in Gwynder's story.
Right. But the main thing that we need to... So I see two complications there. Well, not going to say... Well, two elements. One, this is the beginning of the Orodreth story that's going to culminate in him becoming Turin's puppy dog, right? So, we have to make sure this is going to map well with the whole trajectory of Orodreth's characters we've been developing it.
True.
Right? So that's that. So I agree. He doesn't have to be the focus. We don't have to really emphasize that. But we need, what he's doing and what his policy is going to be relevant, and so we need to make sure that's going to fit. The second element that I see is that the other folks. Celebrimbor, Gil-galad, right? What are they up to? Where are they? Why aren't they? So just some explanation of why they're not into it, and what's going on there, because just their choice is going to be, again, relevant for how we see their characters continuing to develop for later on.
The main reason I picked Gwyndor is, one, he goes to join the fight.
I absolutely agree about Gwyndor.
Secondly, we need to tell the story of him and Finduilas this season.
Absolutely.
So I figured if he's our point of view
makes
character,
the Gil-galad connection even more important.
Right, because that's her brother.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have Gil-galad and Orodreth and Finduilas and Gil-galad all be characters within that story, in some form.
Yeah. Okay, so it's but I certainly agree. The focus is absolutely on Gwyndor's story. Yeah, totally. Okay, so theme. I really love the suggestion, though I've totally forgotten who made it, of hope being the theme. That felt really right to me, and it fits with all this "the day has come" stuff that we're talking about, right? I love what I was won over by was the observation that the season begins with an upswelling of Umdir. We can do it, everybody, right? Believe in the cause. If we all band together, we can make it happen. Who's with me, right? That's how we begin, with Umdir. Like, that's all Umdir, 100% Umdir, right? And it ends with one of the most famous statements of Estelle in the Legendarium, right? With the day shall come again.
Yeah.
And so, not to mention the fact that it just seems entirely delightful to me to have the focus be on hope in the season of the Near Maedhros.
Right. Unnumbered tears, but hope.
There's something that really appeals to me about telling the story of unnumbered tears in a way which is the story of hope, right? And it's not at all to say that it undermines it, right? Like, the whole point is, the Umdir all turns out to be wrong. It isn't the day. The day has not actually come, and they're not going to destroy Morgoth, and they're not going to win. So they're in most ways, their Umdir is going to deceive them, right? So it's not as like sort of perverse as it might sound to say like, no, but we're going to make it hopeful. No, the whole point is to understand, kind of the context of all this, right? To frame what is hope exactly. And what does that mean? Nick, you were kind of touching on this earlier when you were talking about, it may not be, I may not win, right? It doesn't mean things are going to go well. It doesn't mean I'm going to survive, right? This, of course, is the realization that Sam has on the stairs of Cirith Ungol, right? That like, we don't know whether we're in a happy ending or sad ending story, right? But that's not what matters, right?
And Galadriel has already acknowledged that she's fighting the long defeat.
Yeah.
That nothing that she does is going to actually win them what they're striving for.
Yep. Yeah.
So the suggestion of the hope with specifically the Amdir versus Estelle versions of it, that was Arnorian. What is the name? I guess I should have gotten the name right before I said it. Yeah. Arnorian,
yes.
Okay, son of Arnor, whatever that was.
Yeah. No, that I thought that was a brilliant suggestion, and that feels to me like it pulls all these other things together, right? In a way that I none of the other suggestions that I saw, like the idea of unity and coming together, that's obviously going to be happening. Like that's going to be a major thing, but the reason that I like hope better than that one as a theme is that, again, in the end, the conclusion of like, it's not like we're trying to teach moral lessons through these seasons, right? But there's been a kind of like, take home at the end of the day, right? Like we learned something about rebellion in season 3, right? We learned something about change in season 5 and what are like constructive and destructive relationships to change, right? We learned something about reconciliation and what it means and how it happens and why it's important in season 4. I would hate to think that the moral of season 7, if we're talking about unity and togetherness, is in the end, it's pointless, right? And it's all gonna fail, right? So because that's kind of where I feel like that theme would leave us at the end of this, at the end point that we've chosen for this story. But that, again, the moment of Estelle at the end really changes, without in any way undermining the horror and the grief and the sadness of the actual event. To come down at the end to Day Shall Come Again. And, I agree with, somebody was talking about this, that like, Bjarna's Honor was talking about this. GD Towering was talking about this, that like we should actually use that phrase. Like we, use that phrase in Elvish to, again, to continue the play on the idea of the day coming. Right. And in a sense, if everyone is saying the day is coming or the day has come, right, it actually adds a new layer of depth to the famous declaration, day shall come again. Right. Now we hear that in a completely different way, right? We like the day had not come, but they weren't just wrong, right? Day is coming. This wasn't it, right? But like the way it changes the meaning of the word day, right? The way it still insists on hope, even though, again, the Amdir has failed, right? This wasn't the day and it hasn't worked. And yet it doesn't change the fact that day will in fact come again. Anyway, there's just, I think there's so much to love about that. And so it's where it ends us that I really love about that theme.
Yeah. I think that it keeps the story of the Nirnaeth one of Tolkien's stories, because his stories are very much about hope. And sure, this isn't a great place to end, and things are not going to go well for Hurin or anyone in his family. But don't worry, tour is coming.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's something that I think there are a lot of people who would say Tolkien stories are like, hope is one of the most important things about Tolkien stories. But I think that many people who say that might have an oversimplistic view of what that means, and so to kind of
there's got to be real darkness in them to have actual stakes to be hopeful about. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, to me, this is the main the case study of Sam and his relationship with hope over the course of the whole progress of the Lord of the Rings is, I mean, to me, that's the most important case study of hope.
Yes.
Most complex and hard hitting in its way. But anyway, so I think that it's not like in the Nirnaeth Arnodiad that you find hope, but it's despite the Nirnaeth Arnodiad. But you have to have the Nirnaeth Arnodiad, and then still be declaring the day will come again at the end of it, as you're being captured and hauled off to Morgoth. Then you get what hope means in Tolkien's world, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And this again, you think about the references to hope and despair in the Council of Elrond, right? You think about Denethor and hope on then, right? And the conversations with Gandalf there, where Denethor is mocking not only what he believes to be merely Gandalf's Umdir, his hope that things will pan out well, right? But what Denethor most likely believes he knows, but Gandalf does not yet know, has been disproven, right? He believes, he's, I totally believe Mike Drout's theory that Denethor saw Frodo in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, naked prisoner Frodo in the Tower of Cirith Ungol in the Palantir. And so he thinks he has information Gandalf does not have, that Gandalf's hope has already failed. As he says, as Denethor says to Gandalf, right? So, anyway, all these things are involved in, but of course, Gandalf's hope is not that, right? It never was that. We saw that from the Council of Elrond. We see it again, in his response to Denethor. So, and then what Gandalf then goes on to urge in the last debate of the captains. Anyway, so it is a hugely important theme, and it's one that we could pick up again in other places, potentially, but I think it would be really, really fun to bring the concept of hope together with the concept of the Nirnaeth. I was thinking that from the beginning. I wanted to go through the storylines together because I wanted to kind of test it out, as I was kind of thinking about it all the way through. And I think I've come to the end still thinking that would be pretty awesome. You guys think that would work?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah.
Okay. I do. It'll have to be carefully handled near the end. You don't leave the audience thinking, but they lost.
They lost. And they lost horribly and completely.
Right.
Yes.
And I mean the writing of the story is written lends itself to not have that be a problem. It just is something an unskilled hand might
botch that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
it could feel muddy.
Yeah, but I do think it'll work for the type of story we want to be telling and avoid the pitfalls of telling a story where they fail.
Yeah.
Because they do, but that's not what we want to tell the story about. And I think that we'll want to pick a midpoint to the season then.
Yes.
That really highlights the type of hope that we want to see in the Near Ninth.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a little tricky to pull off.
Yeah, it will. It will. So GD Towering was just saying we don't want the takeaway from the season being, wow, they were all dumb to have hope, right? You know,
yeah.
Which it could look that way, right? It could. Look
yeah.
That way.
I mean, so what might be interesting is if Azaghal is kind of by the middle, like in preparation for the battle, kind of the voice of, look, it's become very clear to me that this is what we're supposed to do. Whether it's going to work or not doesn't actually have any bearing on that.
Yeah. Okay. So what the last thing, and we're kind of out of time anyway. The last thing we were going to talk about was the turning point in the middle. I don't have a good candidate for this, and here's why. This is a general problem, but I think we can pick this up later on. And my general problem is I have very little sense of what's happening in the middle of the season. We've got battle at the end. We've got Gondolin at the beginning. And then I feel like we've got this like mushy middle in which we have bunches and bunches of people having lots of conversations with each other, right? And very little in the way of actually anything happening.
So there are at least a few things happening.
Right.
So we already know what Hurin's family story is, right? With his...
We're going to get the plague. We're going to get the death of his father, the death of the life. Right.
Right. And his marriage to Morwen and everything. So we have his story. Yeah. We've got in Nargothrond, we have a romance story to tell as well with Gwyndor.
Yep.
And with the dwarves, it's a new alliance that is going steps beyond what it had before. So there's a lot of relationship building of various types, political relationship building and personal relationship building. And I know that's just a lot of people talking, but at the same time, I feel like
I'm not trying to slight it. I'm just, I don't see, like it was easy to choose the middle point last season.
Right. So the fall of Talangarhath, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the overthrow of Sauron really presented itself very obviously.
Right.
And there have been several things like that, that have been really clear. But here's what I'm thinking. I don't want to try to pick one right now.
Right. You want to know what's going to be in there.
Yeah. I think it'll be easier once we start laying out episodes. Sorry. But I also think that we got to figure out what's going on with Sauron and Galadriel as well. And that I'm wondering if the turning point might be Sauron and Galadriel related, actually, potentially.
Yeah.
If I had to say something right now, like if I was forced to choose tonight, I would say the arrival of the Easterlings. The Easterlings cross the mountains. That's like the game-changing arrival of the Easterlings. But since we're going to be connecting that with at least Sauron and possibly also Galadriel's storylines, I kind of want to wait. I don't even want to like put a flag in that, or like, drive a flag in there, because it might change significantly. But yeah. Oh, hang on, Nick. Here, I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, we also should decide exactly how many episodes the battle proper is going to occupy, because maybe it opens in an episode and then continues on for a couple more, or whatever it is that we decide, because that'll give us a much clearer idea of the shape of the season, because once we've made that decision, then we'll kind of know what needs to be happening around the episode 7, episode 8 point in the season.
Agreed. Yes, I have some thoughts about that, but that's a later discussion.
And quick question: can somebody remind me how did we handle the arrival of the men? If we do your Easterlings idea, is there an opportunity to do like a kind of a callback or a like a sort of a like a kind of a mirrored moment?
Well, do you mean like the first men into Beleriand?
Yes.
So that was the House of Beor marching over the mountains,
Finrod
and
and the
then
harp.
singing the song about the light in the west.
Yeah. So could we do something like a sinister version of that with the Easterlings?
I mean, but do we need it to be sinister? Because
fair enough.
Their arrival is pretty hopeful for the storyline.
That's true.
It depends upon how clever we want to be with it.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, we want to be extremely clever.
Right.
Then it should be a hopeful moment to have them arrive.
But if you do it correctly, then anybody watching it in hindsight would go, "Oh, we should have known they were the bad guys." Because people who watched Frozen and were shocked to find that Hans was the bad guy.
Yeah, right.
Spoiler alert.
Right. Yeah. So we don't want to do sinister.
Yeah. No, but I agree that thinking about that relationship, especially since, again, the text gives the vague sense that Maedhros doesn't explicitly like compare himself to Finrod or anything, right? But like that Maedhros is like, okay, Finrod had the right idea in befriending these humans. I can do it too. Like, hey, look, there's some more humans. I'm gonna go run the Finrod playbook, right, with these humans. And so the idea that there is, even perhaps in Maedhros' own mind, an overt, a parallel there. I think that's an important thing to be thinking about. That would be really fun to play with.
Because it's kind of a significant part of season 5, which groups of elves befriend and form relationships with the men, and obviously Finrod wins everything on that. But Fingon's not so bad either.
Right.
Fingon's relationship with Hodor is pretty significantly good, and he's obviously going to follow that up with Hurin as well.
And even Caranthir came around.
Yeah, Caranthir noticed after the fact that Hallis group was pretty cool, even though she wanted nothing to do with him. So like. And it's the Feanorians who drop the ball. They don't make enduring relationships with any significant groups of humans. Caranthir notices Halith, and Amlach personally goes and swears allegiance to Maedhros. So, Maedhros has one guy in his family.
There were more. There were more.
Does he still have like his like the descendants of Amlach should still be around?
Yeah.
Right?
They were at the Dagor Bragollach in Himring. So some of them died there, but there should be some left. Yeah.
That'll be an interesting cultural thing, actually. Anyway,
the time between these two battles is 18 years, right? Because it's 455 to 472.
Yeah.
So we're talking at most a generation.
Right.
So they're
okay. All right. So we'll pause the mid-season turn question until we come to see the shape of the middle of the season more clearly.
Sure.
And I really think that's going to happen. Well, certainly we don't even have all the raw materials yet because we don't have the full Sauron and Galadriel story. So we'll wait until we start doing our outline to, I think, to sort of see about that. So for next time, next time we're going to discuss Sauron and Galadriel. So if people want for homework to reread the Galadriel and Celeborn chapter of Unfinished Tales to remember the things that, the different stuff, the way Tolkien's thoughts about Galadriel were changing over time after he invented her, which he didn't do until he got there in The Lord of the Rings. And so the different ways in which he was imagining retconning her character back into the Legendarium, and therefore what this could mean and what could be happening here. And then Sauron, of course, we're entering the black hole period in which we have no data whatsoever about what Sauron was up to. But we can't, we don't want him to be doing nothing. So those are the two. And so in the context of this discussion, we're going to have to be thinking in long-term questions. And the other thing that I want to talk about in this context that we started kind of flirting with today, but we didn't really settle down with it, is the cultures of the Easterlings. Like, how many peoples are we talking about? Where are they from? What do they do? I already mentioned I want Bree to be like the capital of a wide-flung empire of humans. Like I totally want that. But because Bree is already there, right? Like, we know Bree's already there. So anyway, we'll see about how we want to. But we do have to think, Marie, as you were saying, about the future trajectory of these cultures, right? Some of them, like the Easterlings of Dor-Lomin, can kind of sink into the ocean and be more or less lost. But we know that some of them are going to end up being the Rohirrim, and presumably others are going to survive as well. In fact, I don't see any reason why the Easterlings that we introduce in this season could not basically be the ancestors of literally every people group we meet in the Third Age. I mean, absolutely all of them, really.
Right.
Right. Even the Haradrim.
Sure.
Theoretically, could be the descendants of people who fled back into the East after this.
Okay, so this distinction I've only ever seen in the Decipher role-playing game for Lord of the Rings, and that being that they're essentially the middlemen. Like, they're not the Dunedain, and they're not the wild men or anything like that, but they are the middlemen.
Yes. Yes, and it's also it's also time to start thinking about that we never have
Jugglemen.
the Woses. Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we gotta bring the Druidine. It's time to import Droogs into
Dor-Lomin.
Yeah, into Beleriand. Yeah, Dor-Lomin. They need to be in Brethil, especially Brethil. That's what we know most about them, is that they were friendly with the people of Brethil. So, yeah, time for Droogs as well. Anyway, so. Yes, much to think about, and all of these things I think are relevant to our conversation next time. All right, very good. Lots of stuff to think about. That next time in question will be Thursday, October 19th at our normal time. So we, in fact, are so far looking to be 3 for 3 in maintaining our 2-week schedule here in Season 7. We'll see what happens. All right. Thanks, everybody. Fun discussion. I am loving how this is shaping up, and I think we have a pretty compelling overall story working here. So thanks, everybody who was listening. Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Marie and Nick and Dave, for your discussion and your help here this evening. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening, and Godspeed.